Hello everyone and welcome back to our journey through the book of John. So last episode we were in chapter 4 and it was the story of the Samaritan woman at the well. So today we find ourselves sitting at the well with Jesus. A little bit before, he's just told the Samaritan woman a lot about her life, and she came to this realization that he was the Messiah. So she had dropped the pot, left everything, and ran back to her city to tell people who she had just met. Now, in the meantime, while this exchange was happening with her and Jesus, his disciples had arrived back from going out to buy some food, and they were just standing there watching this and knowing that it was a weird situation because Jesus was talking to a woman that was considered an outcast. But as we see in the Bible, it tells us that they didn't dare ask him, what are you doing, or why are you speaking to her? So she has just left, and we continue from verse 31, and we will go to the end of that chapter and see what happens next. So let's start by reading. In the meantime, his disciples urged him, saying, Rabbi, eat. But he said to them, I have food to eat of which you do not know. Therefore the disciples said to one another, Has anyone brought him anything to eat? Jesus said to them, My food is to do the will of him who sent me, and to finish his work. Do you not say, There are still 4 months, and then comes the harvest? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look at the fields, for they are already white for harvest. And he who reaps receives wages, and gathers fruit for eternal life, that both he who sows and he who reaps may rejoice together. For in this the saying is true, one sows and another reaps. I send you to reap that for which you have not labored. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labors. So this is a conversation he had with his disciples, and then it switches to when the Samaritan woman goes back to her city. And it tells us, and many of the Samaritans of that city believed in him because of the word of the woman who testified, He told me all that I ever did. So when the Samaritans had come to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. And many more believed because of his own word. Then they said to the woman, Now we believe, not because of what you said, for we ourselves have heard him, and we know that this is indeed the Christ, the Savior of the world. Now after the 2 days, he departed from there and went to Galilee. For Jesus himself testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country. So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans received him, having seen all the things he did in Jerusalem at the feast, for they also had gone to the feast. So Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and implored him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then Jesus said to him, Unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. The nobleman said to him, Sir, come down before my child dies. Jesus said to him, Go your way, your son lives. So the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went his way. And as he was now going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, Your son lives. Then he inquired of them the hour when he got better. And they said to him, Yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. So the father knew that it was the same hour in which Jesus said to him, Your son lives. And he himself believed, and his whole household. This again is the second sign Jesus did when he had come out of Judea into Galilee. So let's take each part that we've seen in the story. First we have when he talks with his disciples, then we have when he goes to Samaria, and then we have when he moves on from there. So as the Samaritan woman leaves, his disciples have come back with food, and so they offer him something to eat. And he says to them, I have food to eat which you do not know. So they were wondering, did somebody bring him food to eat while we were away? So as they were wondering this, Jesus can tell what their thoughts are. And then he goes on to explain how his food is doing the will of his Father and finishing the work that his Father had sent him to earth to do. So we see that what keeps Jesus alive, what keeps him sustained and nourished and fed and fulfilled is not the things of this earth. It's not the food and drink of this world. But what he hungers for most is doing the will of his Father. He is so desperately hungry just to please his Father. And then he says to them, don't you say there's still 4 months to go before the harvest is ready to be gathered? But he says to them, actually lift your eyes up and look out. The fields are white for harvest. Now what does white for harvest mean? I looked a little bit into this, and normally we know that when the wheat is at that golden color, then it is ready to just bring the harvest in. But when it's white, it's at the point where it's overripe. It's been ready for a while and now it's turning white. And when we see the harvest being spoken about in the Bible, the harvest talks about the people that will be told the good news of Jesus, that will receive him. They become the harvest that we reap. And he tells us that that harvest gives eternal fruit. So the people that will come into his kingdom will be counted as wages for those that have gathered it. And then he says how some sow and others reap. He tells them that I sent you to reap that for which you did not labor. Maybe here it's talking about how he sent them to go out and buy food, and they were buying this food that they didn't work towards making. They didn't sow the fields so that they would get the wheat, so that they would get the flour, so that they would make the bread. But they went and they bought something that was already done by others, so they were reaping something that others sowed. So let's take an example of somebody that gives their life to Christ. Perhaps at some point in their life, they picked up a book that somebody had written about Jesus, and they read about him, and they put it away, and it was in their back of their minds, but nothing radical changed in their lives. And let's say that that person continued, and then they came across somebody who started speaking to them about Jesus, and they thought and considered what they said, and they didn't do anything much with that, but it was still in their back of their mind. But then one day they happened to find themselves in a church, and something stronger and deeper touched them in that moment, and that was the moment they said, yes, I choose to give my life to Jesus. I choose to say yes to him and turn around and follow him and live my life according to his ways. In that moment, his soul became part of the harvest for the kingdom. Now, many people sowed in that, but one person or one situation reaped that harvest. And that is what Jesus was trying to explain to them, that in our lives, we're either receiving something that many others have put something in, or if it is us going out to bring people into the kingdom, we might bring somebody in that many others have sowed into already, or we might just sow a seed that will grow over time, and one day somebody else will reap that after all that work that was done by everyone else. But what Jesus was saying was, look, there are more important things right now than food, and that is, let's do the will of the Father. Let's gather these souls for the kingdom, because the time is short. It is time to find and introduce others to our awesome Creator. The next thing we see after the conversation with his disciples was that they head into Samaria, because the people from that city came and asked them to come and spend some time with them. So he goes to Samaria, and he spends time speaking to the people of this outcast city. And it says that many believed in him because of what he said. And they believed that he was the Messiah. And after his time there, it was time to move further up towards Galilee. Now, Galilee, the area of Galilee was more where his hometown was. And it's interesting that Jesus says and testifies here that a prophet has no honor in his own country. So Jesus is saying that someone is less likely to honor you if they know you too well. And that is so true. You know, in the area where he grew up, he wasn't known as anybody but the carpenter's son. Oh, that is Joseph's son. And it's true that the hardest place that you might find that you will be accepted for who you are, especially if you change, is from those people around you, the closest and most familiar people to you. So Cana, where we saw in the previous episode where Jesus had turned the water into wine at the wedding, was in this area of Galilee. So he entered back into Cana, and there it says there was a nobleman who came to Jesus because his son, back in Capernaum, which is a bit further up than Cana, he was sick and he was dying. So this nobleman sees Jesus, and he goes to him and he begs him, Jesus, come down and heal my son because he's dying. And Jesus says to him, unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. But we see the nobleman, he's really desperate for this miracle because his child is dying. And so he pleads with Jesus again, like, sir, come down before my child dies. And we see Jesus has such a heart of compassion. And it tells us in the Bible at another place that there was nobody that came to Jesus that wasn't healed. Jesus healed everybody that came to him. And so that wasn't a question for Jesus. Everybody deserved to be healed. So when people came to him, everyone was healed. And so Jesus says to the nobleman, go your way, your son lives. He believed. So the authority that Jesus carried was so great that his word had power, that his word touched the heart of people, and they knew that it was true. And so it says the man believed, and he went his way. And on his way, his servants met him, and they told him the great news that your son lives. And he asked his servant, what time did this happen? And as his servant explains to him the time, he realizes that that indeed was the time that Jesus had said, go your way, your son lives. And it's interesting because it says to us, and he himself believed and his whole household. Now, we know it says to us that when Jesus said, go your way, he believed his word. But then when he saw the evidence, it tells us, and he himself believed and his whole household. So I feel that there is even levels sometimes to our belief. So many of us believe Jesus, but we don't really believe him that he can be all for us for our lives. And sometimes, as Jesus said to the nobleman, unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. So many times we are wanting Jesus to prove himself before we surrender fully to him. You know, many people believe about him. It says in the Bible, even Satan believes, but Satan hasn't given his life over to Jesus. So what is the level of your belief today in Jesus? You know, when he went to Samaria, it doesn't tell us of anyone asking him for a sign. Those people, the outcasts, their hearts seem to be more open to truly believe that he was the Messiah and to truly believe what he was telling them. And yet, a Jewish nobleman found it harder to just accept Jesus for who he was until he saw a sign and a wonder from him. You know, in the book of Hebrews, it tells us that God is pleased by faith. And what is faith? In the book of Hebrews, in chapter 11:1, it says that faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. True faith does not rely always on proof, but it comes by knowing that the one who speaks it is truth himself. So what I want to leave you with today is to challenge what you believe. And whatever answer you come to, and if you find that there are areas of unbelief in your life, then take them to Jesus and pray to him to help you with your unbelief.